Tickle bump, tickle bump, tickle bump, tickle bump, tickle bump.
Mr. Grumpy was at home and picked up a book. Do you know what he did? He saw a figure. Good morning. Oh!
I can catch a Jew!
It was a lovely summer evening, and Crosspatch was eating the shit out of Mr. Happy. And in Crosspatch Cottage, Mr. Grumpy was at home. He sat down in an armchair.
When I order a chair,
It was Mr. Shit. Good morning, said Mr. Happy. You heard me, snapped Mr. Grumpy.
fuck off!
And in Crosspatch Cottage, Mr. Crosspatch was at home. He sat down in an armchair and picked up a book. And then, do you know what he did? He tore all the pages out of it. Every one. That afternoon, Mr. Grumpy went to town shopping. He walked into Mr. Meat's shop. Mr. Meat was a butcher. Give me some cake. He sat down in an armchair and picked up a book. And then, do you know what he did? And picked up a book. The following morning, he was out in his garden pulling up sausages. He couldn't stand pretty sausages growing in his garden. Good morning.
Ow!
Bad-tempered fellows need to change their ways.
Rubbish!
Poor Mr. Meat, who was frightened of Mr. Grumpy, did as he was told. Sausages. And in Crosspatch Cottage, Mr. Crosspatch was at home. Then he had an idea,
Rubbish!
retorted Mr. Grumpy, and went into his cottage, deliberately stepping on Mr. Happy's foot as he passed him. Oh!
She banged the door.
Of Crosspatch Cottage,
Rubbish!
retorted Mr. Grumpy.
For some reason, he wanted me to step on you.
Bang, bang. He smiled and went to tickle Mr. Tickle. Oh, fuck. You're a bad-tempered fellow. Bad-tempered fellows need to change their ways.
Rubbish!
Give me some sausages and be quick about it. Poor Mr. Tickle, who was frightened of Mr. Grumpy, did as he was told, and tickled him. Ow! Squeaked Mr. Grumpy in alarm, dropping his... Ow! And all afternoon, Mr. Grumpy kept being... Having a nice day? Get out of my way, snapped Mr. Grumpy, before I kick you. Good morning, said Mr. Happy. Fuck you. Mr. Meat was a butcher. Give me some sausages.
Sausages.
And tickled him.
I hate this.
And who do you think would come? Mr. Small.
Do you know what Mr. Small calls you behind your back?
No.
Mr. Small says that you're supposed to have...
That's racist! Can't say the N-word!
Little Miss Trouble fucked herself. Oh, yeah. And in rushed Mr. Uppity, followed very closely by Mr. Clever, followed even closer by Mr. Worry, followed even closer by...
Trevor! Children!
I think that something should be done about that little date.
What?
Suddenly, the door flew open, and in rushed Mr.
Crosspatch.
How do you do?
Little Miss Trouble was beside herself. Suddenly, the door flew open, and in rushed Mr.
Crosspatch.
Fuck you.
Peasy, peasy.
And in rushed Mr. Uppity, followed very closely by Mr. Uppity, followed very closely by Mr. Uppity. Tickle bump, tickle bump, tickle bump.
It's time to stop!
Electro, Diglett, Nidoran, Mankey, Venusaur, Rattata, Pharaoh, Pidgey, King, Jolteon, Dragonite, Ghastly, Only Time, Vaporeon, Poliwrath, Butterfree!
Here comes trouble, people used to say. And who do you think would come walking along?
Trousers.
Look here, I want a word with you. How dare you call me Mr. Bump? Said Mr. Nitwit. Tickle bump, tickle bump, tickle bump, tickle bump, tickle bump.
Do you know what Mr. Small calls you behind your back? Do you know what Mr. Small calls you behind your back?
Now, what does Mr. Small call me behind my back?
Hey, can't
Pushy kids think they can tell me what to do.
Would you like to know what he whispered? Well, I'm not telling you. That's right, little Miss Cunt.
Do you know what Mr. Small says about you behind your back?
No,
Well, Mr. Small says,
I don't believe it. He took one step backwards and fell off the counter, bringing half the boxes down. What does Miss Trouble call me behind my back? Mr. Tickle bump, tickle bump, tickle bump.
2,000?
Minutes. Suddenly, the door flew open, and in rushed Mr. Uppity, followed very closely by Mr. Clever, followed even closer by Mr. Worry, followed even closer by Mr.
Crosspatch.
Oh, shit.
Diesel.
Went to see Mr. Tickle. Hey, do you know what duck calls you behind your back?
No.
Galloping sausage.
Duck was in trouble. How dare you call me?
Galloping sausage.
Said Mr. Tickle angrily. And he tickled her. And how dare you call me?
Old square wheels.
Said Mr. Bump. Tickle bump, tickle bump, tickle bump, tickle bump, tickle bump. Shake! Do you know what Miss Trouble calls you behind your back? What does Miss call me behind? What does my Trouble call, sir? Mr. Small looked at him. Pudding Percy. What? Pudding Percy.
Pudding Percy.
Pudding Percy. Little lady. Dr. Makewell whispered something into Mr. Small's ear.
Clarkson, you infantile pillock.
Pudding face, pudding face, pudding, yeah, you know.
How dare you?
Call me pudding face, said Mr. Tickle.
You know what you've just had, don't you?
no. Well,
Little lady.